Xbox has gone through a multiple generations of changes when it comes to its overall console design and the aesthetics of the console itself. And as gamers and as fans of Xbox, Nintendo, PlayStation, we always get excited whenever there's going to be a new console reveal. And we get excited because of not only what it means for the potential for us as gamers to be able to play with higher resolution, greater fidelity, graphics, ray tracing, improved frame rates, consistent frame rates. All of these things always end up mattering to us. But one thing that always stands out to us too is, how does it look? Today on Top Shelf Tuesday, we're going to be talking about the overall evolution of the actual Xbox consoles over the generations and how they've evolved from looking at like the OG Xbox and talking about the exciting Xbox Series X. That episode starts right now. It is a great day on the internet, everybody, and welcome to Assemble. I'm Matt. Thank you for joining us today on Top Shelf Tuesday. What we're gonna do is let's go. Let's deep dive into some Xbox. Let's get into this conversation a little bit. And I was thinking about this topic. Of really how can I show and talk about my excitement for new consoles, whether it's going to be the PlayStation 5 or the Xbox. There's so much going on right now and I am so excited to be able to get my hands on the next generation of consoles. But I wanted to talk about kind of the overall evolution of how these consoles have looked. I don't want to get into specs. I can't handle it because it's all over the place and we all end up arguing. This is a place of positivity. This is a place where you can come out and chill for a few minutes. But I want to talk about today and kind of, I guess, ranking, but more so really having a conversation around how the Xbox itself, the design has evolved over the years since all the way back to the OG Xbox. So speaking of which, let's kick things off with number one on the list, and that is going to be the OG, the original Xbox. Now when Bill Gates is out there on stage and he does the grand reveal, this was really monumental because of a few things. One, Xbox and Microsoft were coming out to finally compete with Nintendo, to finally compete with Sony. But I want to talk about how that console design actually looks. And let me know in the comments below, guys, what did you think and what was your experience with the first gen Xbox? Now for me, I am actually later to the game when it comes to Xbox. I have not been a lifetime Xbox fan or a lifetime user. I have not had all the consoles. But one console that always did grab my eye back in the day was going to be the original Xbox. I never owned it. I was always staying on the camp of Sony and Nintendo because I wasn't too sure about the games that they had when it came over to Xbox. But I was always curious. I look at the design and the aesthetics of this and thought just how different it was. You have a giant X on the top. This thing is a behemoth. You think the Xbox One was big. This thing is massive. It's a car battery. You had these massive ports that are on the front, but it did really cool things too, because it was kind of your first console that you were going to get that was going to have an Ethernet port on the back. Yeah, we're still getting composite cables because of the time and the age of this thing is pre-HDMI for our games. But looking at the choice that they went with back then, and very much in line with how technology was, where everything was just kind of boxy and giant, right? We look at a game console, and this was one of the biggest things I'd ever seen. Coming from my Nintendo, my Super Nintendo, even my PS1, looking at those in comparison to this was gigantic. But I do remember my friends that had the original Xbox, and what drove me over there, literally to their home, was to check out Halo. And I will remember that, by the way, if you're old enough to remember this, we had a thing called Blockbuster Video. Not many of you remember, but Blockbuster would let you actually rent out not only games, but you could actually rent out the consoles. And I remember one weekend actually renting out the Xbox, the original one, being so ingrained with Nintendo and with Sony and my PlayStation. This was my first crack at it, and my exposure was with my friends that had the original Xbox. And I was really blown away with how it looked because it was like nothing I'd ever seen before. You had green on a box, which was totally different. It was a different design and it was a different aesthetic. These giant buttons that were on the console too, that I just didn't know what to deal with. And then you have the controller too, which is a completely different design than what I had been exposed to as a kid, coming from primarily from Nintendo and Genesis. And while I think back now about how almost silly the box actually looks, because if you take a look today, what I thought of it as a kid when I did rent that Xbox and brought it home for, I think I rented it and rented it again for another week. What I really noticed and what stood out was how different it was. And different from in terms of how the games were, what the games lineup were, specifically with Halo, but just how much different of an approach Microsoft was taking with a game console and not going for a smaller design like we seem to have going on right now over the years. And it's kind of swinging back the other way as well when we look at the latest consoles that are coming out. It was very interesting for its time. I really enjoyed looking at it now to see, well, what grabbed people then, because it was certainly a lot bigger than Sony and what they were doing. It's definitely a lot bigger than what Nintendo was doing at the time. And we always get excited about the new box and what the box actually looks like. And I can't remember, you guys tell me, when you got your original Xbox, were you that excited as you are like today with how the boxes look? Did that matter to you when you were actually getting the next system and the next console? Or was it something that we'd actually built up over the years as we've gotten new technology, as we get into phones and new consoles pretty regularly, especially now in the last 10 years? Let me know what you guys think. Now, next up on my list is number 2 is going to actually be the Xbox 360 Slim. Now, when this was unveiled in E3 in 2010, I was kind of excited, and I did actually end up getting the 360 Slim. I skipped the 360, the original one, and that was mostly because of Red Ring of Death. Seeing all of my friends looking online or reading about it where people were having so much trouble with this console, with that red ring, and the, I want to say, $1 billion roughly that Microsoft had to spend to kind of fix this whole thing, I was taking a more wait and see approach. And the Xbox 360 was a jump in technology, and it was a very much an evolution of it coming in with a nice big white box. But what I really liked and what I actually ended up grabbing was going to be that Xbox 360 Slim. What worked for me was really, it was coming down to obviously things like built-in Wi-Fi, but when I look at the aesthetics, when I look at the design of it, jet black, having a little bit of a matte finish to it, you're having multi-tones, nice green button that wasn't going to go popping red on me. I like the overall design and approach that they took when it came to the 360 Slim. Going from the 360 with that Ethernet port to a Wi-Fi built in was, for a console gamer that came late to the game for Xbox, this really shined for me because I was looking at the ability to be able to grab onto Wi-Fi in my house, plus I got the Ethernet built in, a larger hard drive at the time, which, guys, wasn't it like 250 gigs? Is what we were actually going to get when we had the HDD that came in. That was like crazy big for us. So those things really didn't matter. But when I think about that console, I liked how much more grown up it looked compared to that of the 360, the white one that came out, where you had much more of a plain white finish to it. And it always kind of stuck with me that the white one was really plagued with all of these problems. And once the system and the console had matured, yes, there are many iterations that they actually came out with within the 360 lineup over the course of its lifetime. But the 360 Slim really grabbed me because it was something that was able to sit comfortably within my console, within my entertainment system. And it was my real first experience getting into Xbox and experiencing the ecosystem that it had to offer. Okay, number 3 on the list, guys, is going to be the Xbox One. Now, I bought the Xbox One on launch day. I think it was on launch day. It was within the launch window. I do remember that. I got the PS4 on launch day. I lined up for that one. And I think, yeah, I got the Xbox One, I think in the first week when it came out. The first thing that came to mind when I got this thing home and watching the E3 press conferences and watching everything online, that, yep, this was a VCR. And I had almost this shameful disappointment feeling when I got the Xbox One. I was excited to be able to get a new console, and again, on the Xbox side, I came from 360 Slim, and looking at it, knowing that it was going to be a little bit bigger, I wanted to get kind of the new toy, the new powerhouse of the next generation, and I wanted to get into the conversation. As big of a fumble as it was with Xbox and Microsoft on stage at E3, talking about Call of Duty nonstop and TV, and sports, I still wanted to be able to jump in and go, okay, I want to come along for the ride for the next generation. And Xbox One was an interesting one for that design itself. Because not only coming from a behemoth of a system, it almost felt like we were going backwards, where we went back to the OG Xbox, where we had this really massive entertainment box for games. And not only that, it felt like at times they're trying to make the hero and the star of the show the Kinect. And I just was like, why? Why are we pushing this for the fitness thing? Clearly it was an older vision and it was a different one than what we have today. And the market and the gamer really pushed that and showed Xbox and Phil Spencer, in my opinion, that it is all about the games and it's about the experience and being able to play with your friends online. But that box, that giant VCR of a box with its grating on the top, it's split in half in a lot of ways, like the curvatures and designs, it was weighty, it was so heavy. I will say that it was quiet, and I found that majority of the Xbox consoles have been quiet. Unlike my jet airplane that I have on my PlayStations from the 3 and the 4, and fingers crossed that PS5 is actually quiet this time. But it's interesting to see what that console represents now, because when we look at the original Xbox One, and not the redesigns that we have seen and experienced later and to date, the Xbox One really was almost in a time capsule, right? Of what the older Xbox and Microsoft team represented and what their vision was for gamers. And their vision at the time was less about the games and more about the entertainment experience, about having an additional HDMI port so you could plug in your cable box, and talking more about sports and the navigation guide, your TV guide built into your Xbox. And none of those things clicked with me, and it was the hope that we were going to get more games, and over time we've gotten there a little bit, but it really showed me that this was a console for a little tiny blip in time where we weren't getting anything that was going to be drastically different, but the box itself was different in that it was really feeling like it was a step backwards. And to me, it does represent the step back that Xbox had to take in order to move forward. And moving forward, like it has, we have seen it evolve, we've seen it move forward when it comes to the Xbox One X. Now again, we have so many consoles within the Xbox lineup, and we talk about the custom Xboxes that we have and the Gears of War ones that are amazing. Like there's so many different ones we have out there, but talking about the Xbox One X, this is where I think we really started to see a different shift in design, as well as with the perspective of Microsoft with Phil Spencer at the helm. And it really felt like this is what Xbox is going to be going forward into the future. The Xbox One X, when it was revealed by the team at Xbox and Phil Spencer, was really talking about the power and how much of a beast this console was going to be. And I actually ended up going from my Xbox One, and then I ended up getting the Xbox One X. And I've never done that. And I've never gone from like, well, I need to get, really the updated version of it, or really even considered I would want to. I always thought that I was going to get the Xbox One and then wait until probably around now when we get to the Series X, but I just disliked the console so much in terms of what it was able to do in terms of power and the aesthetics of it. It wasn't appealing. It wasn't something I was happy to show off, especially for the price. So I was excited when we got the One X reveal and that launch. The box has that matte black finish to it. It's slim, it's sleek, it fits nicely, it's quiet, it has all the ports you need in it. And again, the One X to me really felt like it was trying to show us that the new direction of Xbox, it is going this way. It is going towards a sleeker, cleaner, more reasonable, more understanding brand where it was actually going to talk to the gamer. And I'm using a lot of funny talk right now where I'm talking about how a console represents this, but I'm just trying to say that it really highlights what the consoles really do mean when we look at the physical boxes themselves. And when you look back on the history of all these games, you can kind of look at these things and match them up with how they overall performed. And that's what we're starting to see when it comes into the Series X lineup. And we were able to get slims and white finishes on all of these different models and consoles that we got across Xbox. But it's when we get into number 5, which is the newly announced and soon to be released, the Series X. And the Series X is interesting. We've now had so many people come online and they have their pre-orders and they have their units that are actually, they're showing them off now. And it's interesting to see that we've gone from the standard box that is going to sit on your tabletop, that they've actually gone for a vertical looking box that's going to stand up pretty tall. And the downside is that they've actually got it where it's gonna, if you put it down on its side, people are commenting that it's gonna look more like a big Yule log, which is kind of unfortunate, and I'll have to see how in my entertainment system if it's going to actually be able to stand up, and I really hope it does. Now, to me, the Xbox Series X really represents to me the simplicity of what Microsoft is trying to go for with this brand new generation and new generation of gamers. It's a simple, sleek design, matte finish, rectangle box all the way around, green on the top, a little bit of grading. Like, it is so simple in its design and its approach. And I think that this simple, refined redesign is what Microsoft really needs going into this generation. At first glance for the Series X, not that exciting. Looked at it and just thought, oh, the big cube. All right. Because with consoles, again, the excitement, half of the excitement is, what does it look like? What does the thing look like? You go through rumors and speculations and code names and all this stuff until you finally see it pulled out of the curtain and you get it. And I think with the Series X, for some of us were very excited. And I think for some of us, we were almost left wondering, going, okay, well, let's see what it's all about. Let's experience it. Let's get a little bit more. And I feel like the Series X represents more of the, well, let's wait and see what Microsoft is going to do. And based up until today, from the time of this recording, we're seeing what that box is kind of representing. That simple design, sleek design that Microsoft is going for is very much what they're going for with gamers today and gamers going into November. Simple, clear approach. Simple messaging like we've seen with the pre-orders, simple messaging when it comes to Game Pass, changing everything up when it comes to just how the gamers are actually going to get to experience the games by grabbing Bethesda and bringing them into the fold, getting EA Play and bringing that into the fold for November 10th. So that you have Game Pass Ultimate, you got one subscription that's going to be able to do it all, and you can have the abilities, obviously, that we can play on all of our devices, from our phones to the consoles to previous gen consoles, or that Xbox One that is sitting on your shelf collecting dust. You can turn that thing on now. But to me, anyways, guys, the Series X does represent that simple uniformity and uniformity in terms of their messaging. Anyways, guys, that brings us to the end of Top Shelf Tuesday today. I really just want to be able to talk to you about Xbox, and I wanted to get into it a little bit more because I am such a big gamer. I'm passionate about the business, the industry. I mean, how many hours a day or a week I spent, like you, watching reviews, looking up the latest news, what's coming down the pipe, announcement after announcement, especially this time of year. It's very exciting. And I wanted to do a little bit of a kind of a retrospective, just very quickly and briefly, of just those consoles and what they tend to represent for their generation and what it might look like going into the next. And who knows, in 2 years' time, we might possibly have another redesign of the Series X, and we get this, 2-3 year redesign of the consoles and get them beefed up again. It'll be interesting to see what they do and what this will look like 2-3 years down the road, and how do we look at the Series X. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today on Assemble, and we're doing our Top Shelf Tuesday today. I'm Matt. I hope you enjoyed just going down a little bit of memory lane on some of the consoles for Xbox specifically. What was your favorite? What is your most memorable Xbox console? Was it something that we obviously left off of this list? And why is that console kind of your favorite? Is it simply just because of the games and that's awesome? Or did you really like which design of which Xbox console really clicked with you? What was kind of your favorite overall design and why? Thanks so much for watching. And as always, thank you guys for assembling with us. See ya.